I'm Paul Levinson, and welcome to Light On, Light Through, episode 354. Another roundtable discussion with Captain Phil, Marybeth Ritkouski, and Mike Rizzo about the third and presumably final season of Star Trek Picard. Well, we had a great long discussion, almost 2 hours, last night. Let's get right into it. Here is Phil. Last night, pretty much around, about 9 o'clock at night.
Scotty, we're going to need every ounce of your engines. We're going to put 100 million miles between us and that madman.
Aye, aye, sir.
That's right. It is time for the review of Season 3 of Star Trek Picard. Here on Friday Night Freeform.
We are the Metrons.
The Metrons are chiming in.
We would suggest you make whatever memorial arrangements, if any, which are customary in your culture. We believe you have very little time left.
We appeal to you in the name of civilization. Put a stop to this.
However, we are not without compassion.
Okay, enough of that. I'm playing the Star Trek Disco Remix League of Extraordinary Star Trek Nerds. I want to welcome back to the airwaves Michael Rizzo. Say hello to everybody, Mike.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Marybeth Ritkouski.
Hey, guys. How's your Friday going?
And Paul Levinson, the wonder, the genius, university professor, science fiction writer. I'm surprised you're not on CNN right now, Paul, with everything that has come over the news this last 24 hours.
Well, I was invited to go on CNN at this very same hour, but you took precedence. Hey? It's not even close.
So all right. So should I send a thank you note to Anderson Cooper, Paul?
Yes, thank Anderson. Tell him I'm sorry, but Captain Phil
awaits. Well, after that wonderful affirmation of my beauty and talent, Paul, why don't you tell everybody where to find you? Tell them about the Robinson Calculator and the new anthology just coming out, and of course, it's Real Life, the radio play. So lay it all on us.
Sure. Well, first of all, Robinson Calculator is a novelette that I wrote a couple of years ago. It's going to appear in a new anthology called Robots Through the Ages, which I'm thrilled beyond anything I've done in years to be part of, because along with me, and far lower than these people, you have Philip K. Dick, Ambrose Bierce, Avram Davidson, and by the way, there's a Star Trek connection to this because there's an audio book coming out at the same time as the paper and hardback of the anthology. And in the audio book, obviously, we're going to have different people reading the stories. And Leonard Nimoy, years ago, did a reading of Avram Davidson's wonderful story, The Golem, and they managed to get the rights to that readings. So it's going to be a spectacular anthology. As far as where to reach me, I don't know, just search on my name on Amazon. I'm at Paul Lev on Twitter and a couple of other places, and I'm always happy to have some new followers.
Excellent, and congratulations. It is. I did read about Nimoy and had done a reading of that story about Avram Davidson, which is a perfect fit if you know Avram Davidson and Leonard Nimoy. It's like a perfect fit for the two of them. So I think fantastic. So we'll be looking forward for that coming out. Marybeth Ritkouski has many credits to her name. Sci-Fi Distilled, the Star Trek set tours. So where can we hear from you, Marybeth?
You can at me on Twitter at MB Ritko. It's MBRITKO. But it's probably easier to find me on Facebook. Just look for Sci-Fi Distilled, and I'll pop up. I'll crop up under that somewhere.
And what's happening on the Star Trek set tours?
The Star Trek Set Tours has all kinds of exciting stuff going on for the summer. In July, we welcome the one and only Mr. William Shatner to the Set Tours for the William Shatner Weekend. And then later in August, our big annual event, Trek Condoroga, this year features the cast of the show that we're about to talk about. The cast of Picard. We will have Brent Spiner, we will have John Delancey, we will have Ed Spaliers, and we will have Jonathan Frakes with us. So come on out and meet all of them in August.
Fantastic. Michael Rizzo, you have similar credits, but let's hear him.
Yeah, I mean, Sci-Fi Distilled is I guess I'm the creator of the show, the host of the show. Marybeth is my co-host. We do once a week. We talk about random science fiction, fantasy, whatever. It's just people talking about stuff. Try to keep it always positive. And then, of course, I also volunteer up at the Set Tour as well. So you can find me the same place pretty much. Sci-Fi Distilled on Facebook is probably the easiest place to find us.
You just did an episode of Sci-Fi Distilled, Michael, with the science fiction cliches. How did that go? What was the big name me a couple of the big cliches, and then I'll ask the same question to Paul and Marybeth.
The Wilhelm scream is probably one of my favorite. If you don't know the story, the Wilhelm scream, you've heard it. It's become a Hollywood joke. It's not just in sci-fi. Many movies use this scream that was recorded in the 50s in a film, and it has been used over and over and over and over in many films when somebody is falling, getting attacked, somehow being hurt on a film. And filmmakers now add that in just as a joke to put that in. It's in Star Wars is really when it really took off. They used it several times in the Star Wars, the original trilogy. So what were some of the other cliches that we covered? There were so many,
There were so many. It's always, the aliens flew millions of miles to steal our resources, but the one-man army or the ragtag group are going to save it. And there's always a countdown, and the timer stops at 1, and there's a shadowy government figure, and then there's an eccentric scientist, and then there's the big happy ending, and then love conquers all. These are all the kinds of cliches that just keep cropping up over and over and over again.
You mean the cliche where they just happen to have one ship left? One ship that can do the job, that can save the day when all other ships have been incapacitated. Just one ship. With the letter D after its name.
Sounds familiar.
Paul, any sci-fi cliches you want to lay on us before we get into the meat and potatoes here?
Yeah, well, for me, I love time travel, both as a writer and a reader. And the biggest cliche in time travel is people travel to the past and do things without the slightest idea that they may be utterly changing the world to the point where they wouldn't even exist in the future. Obviously they never read Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, any of those other great writers who did think about those things. Robert Heinlein as well. So that to me is the worst cliche in science fiction.
Wow, awesome.
Paradoxes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Paradoxes, yeah.
We just want to, because this is delayed from last week, we had a little family emergency last week, but everyone's fine. We got back from the emergency room early, and everything is okay, and doctors have been seen, blood has been drawn, tests have been taken, and everyone's okay. And we even went and took the cat in for her yearly physical today, and the cat's doing okay as well. But that means we missed out on having Roy Belquist and Colleen Bement here. Now, Colleen Bement is from Denver area, and she does Nerd Alert News. If you Google Nerd Alert News, Colleen Bement, she will come up, and please check her out. She has a very active Twitter feed. And Roy Belquist has Roy's Sci-Fi Tie-Dye Corner. And Roy is on every day. When is Roy on, Marybeth?
Fridays and Sundays usually, but that could change from week to week. Depends on what he's doing.
Depends if it's his wedding anniversary or if he's going to a model spaceship convention. So look him up. His co-host is normally Ross Amico, terrific classical music DJ. So you'll want to check all that out as well. So we're talking about Season 3 of Star Trek Picard, a streaming show on the Paramount Plus network. Season 3, the show had been a little bumpy from the beginning in Season 1 with some weird stuff going there. In Season 2, they went back in time and they did all of Paul Levenson's cliches back in time, and there was parallel universes and things like that. But in Season 3, it seemed to be back to that old-time religion, back to the old Star Trek The Next Generation, more or less, that we all had come to know and love. And it got great reviews. It got great discussion on. I'm gonna kick it off. I'm gonna go around the circle. I'm gonna kick it off with Michael. Michael, get us going. Get us started on Star Trek Picard Season 3.
Well, as you said, the first 2 seasons were rough, to put it kindly as possible. So for me, going into 3 was with a lot of skepticism. I had heard tons of positive things from people who worked on the show. Oh, you're gonna love it. It's, and gotta admit, the first episode I was a little I don't want to say disappointed, but kind of like, I'm not seeing this great changeover. I saw a lot of kind of what I thought was kind of weak writing, or they could have been better. I thought that, again, they're treating the characters kind of poorly, that kind of thing. But it at each episode got better and better for me. There were still some niggles I had in there that bothered me, but overall it was a so much superior season compared to the last 2. One thing I think we can all agree on is that Season 3 was fan service at its finest. I mean, it was definitely done. Lots of Easter eggs, bringing back old characters. The storyline was pretty good. They brought in some old enemies, that we kind of. So overall, it was done really well. Of course, I guess we can give away spoilers. I guess at this point, Phil. You haven't seen it.
No, I'm going to tell everybody right now. This is a spoiler-filled zone. You've had a lot of time to see this. I believe Star Trek: Strange New Worlds is about to drop in a week or 2 on the Paramount Plus network. I'm very excited about that. So. Everybody, spoil away, and you know what? I'm sorry. You had your chance. So go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead,
of
Michael.
Course, the ultimate ending is we get to see the Enterprise D again, and not just from outside. They actually rebuilt the entire bridge, and which was great to see. It was so nostalgic seeing the original crew, the entire original crew, on that old bridge. And of course, again, huge fan service, and the old D came back. Geordi rescued it from the crashed planet from generations and rebuilt the star drive section, and so we got to see it. And the other cool part was I loved the Fleet Museum, that whole concept of it, and we saw that was another thing. You could see all the little ships that we loved, and Voyager, I think, was in there, and there was a Constitution class. Of course, it couldn't have been our 1701 because that one burned up. That was just completely destroyed, but it was there. I think the Enterprise NX-01 was in there, I believe, with the refit, if I'm not mistaken, that Doug Drexler did. So that was really cool. I loved that. And we had like I said, we had all these little cameos of different characters from the original season. And they brought in some Deep Space Nine stuff, which was kind of neat, I thought, too. So overall, Terry Matalas, who did a really good job, I think Star Trek needs to keep that momentum going with people that they brought the Okudas and Drexler back in to do a lot of the artwork and stuff for it. Because they worked on the original shows, so that they brought them back in because they were like the knowledge map, so to speak, for all that stuff, so that they could bring it back to exactly the way it was.
And it seems like they listened to them too. They didn't just bring them back and put their names in the credits. Seems like they actually listened to them.
Oh no, they worked on it. Yes, and I talked to I'm fairly good friends with all of them, and certainly Denise and I know Marybeth chats with her too. So we were talking. And of course, they were telling us, "You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it." So leaked a few things to us. Of course, we couldn't say anything, but so I kind of knew that the D was coming back before it did. But yeah, overall, I loved it. I did have, so we could talk about some of my niggles if you want.
Oh, absolutely. We have a lot of time. Yeah. Fasten your seatbelts.
Yeah.
I will say before we move on to Marybeth, I will say in terms of Fleet Museum, Long Island is home to the Cradle of Aviation Museum, which has, the Lindbergh plane. It has a lot of planes. I mean, a copy, the Lindbergh plane that flew in the movie. The Lindbergh movie.
Spirit of St. Louis.
Thank you, Spirit of St. Louis. That movie's that plane that they use in that film is hanging up in that collection, along with a lot of other planes over the years. So the fact that there's a fleet museum makes perfect and total sense to me. But there are other problems with the Fleet Museum that I'll talk about later.
We have the Air and Space Museum, which is where the original Spirit of St. Louis is.
Yeah. I had to correct myself because I was thinking, that's right. Yeah. But tying this into Long Island, Marybeth, your opening salvo on Picard season 3.
My opening salvo. So Rizzo just gave us a fantastic overview, and before we really start drilling down into any individual performances, plot points, or any of the myriad of Easter eggs, I've got to say, let's give it up to Cherry Metalis for doing this. He pulled this off because he knows Trek, and he worked on it. He started working, I want to say on Rizzo. Do you remember he started on Voyager maybe, or Enterprise?
Yeah, maybe.
And
the age would be about right.
Yeah. And you guys may also know him from 12 Monkeys, the TV show 12 Monkeys, which was a great show, which is how he knew Todd Stashwick, which is how he pulled Todd Stashwick in as Liam Shaw. But lately I follow their Twitters, and lately I'm noticing a lot of those guys taking shots of and posting snapshots of a billboard that has gone up in Tinseltown in Hollywood, urging the folks who vote for the Emmys to please consider Picard. They are not they're not even predicted to be, they're not, but everyone's like, do it. And you know what? Yes, absolutely. I think they should be considered for an Emmy, a primetime Emmy. I'm sure they'll get Creative Arts Emmys, but I think they should be considered for a primetime Emmy. I think it should be Best Drama. And I know that both Patrick Stewart and Amanda Plummer are being singled out for their performances, and so deservedly so. And because Next Gen only ever got one primetime Emmy nod, 1994, when they were wrapping it up, and they didn't win. I think they're due. Star Trek, particularly Next Gen, is a juggernaut of American science fiction television, and I think they're due. So, and this was a culmination of 30 some odd years of Star Trek glory. So yeah, they're due. Of course, it lives on, but they're due.
Fantastic. And just as a touchstone, Michael and Marybeth, I was thinking before we go to Paul and me, what's your entry point into Star Trek fandom? Was it the original series in reruns? Because I know you're a little bit younger than I am. Was it the Next Gen? Because I know a lot of people are Next Gen fans, and I never really thought about that too much, because I always thought if you like Star Trek, you like the 1966 Star Trek, So, and that's always been like a misconception of me. Marybeth?
So I'm born in 71, so I wasn't watching it.
No.
So yeah, I was watching original series in rerun, and there's a whole story behind it. But yes, that is reruns are my introduction point. But Next Gen honestly was the first one that was all for me, because I was like a teenager, like in the 80s. So that one was all mine. It was my Star Trek.
In between listening to Pink Floyd.
Yeah,
yes.
Well, it was the 80s. It was like The Cure and Madonna.
It was like that. The goth phase was in full swing. Yes, okay. The black fingernails. All right. Michael, what's your entry point? I know you're an Enterprise fan.
I'm also original series from reruns. I was born in 1967. So yeah, I was too small to watch it live. But yeah, I picked it up. It was on. I lived in Southern Connecticut, so New York stations were our staple, Channel 11 out of New York, WPIX, used to run it at like 5 o'clock every day.
Yep.
After you're watching it, and you kind of almost got, because it was something to watch, and then you just kind of got hooked on it. Of course, into the films in the 80s, and then I was in college when Next Gen aired, so I remember a bunch of us in my college dorm room huddled around the TV watching the first episode. Of course, I had been to conventions and stuff, so we had seen all the hype about Next Gen. But yes, Star Trek, the original series, is always going to be my favorite. 1701 is always going to be my favorite ship. But I have to say, number 2 is Enterprise and NX-01. And I know it's underrated, but it is my second favorite Star Trek.
Yeah, for me, I do remember seeing the original series. I was born in '62. And I remember seeing Who Mourns for Adonais on the air when I remember that because I was trying to watch Lost in Space, and I was mad, and I was trying to figure out what Star Trek was, and I remember asking my sister if they were lost. That was while the Apollo, the god Apollo, was shooting lightning bolts out of his finger at the ship. But then I picked it up in reruns in the '70s, like Marybeth and Michael. But I do remember when Star Trek Animated premiered, and I remember watching Beyond the Farthest Star on a Saturday morning, and that was kind of special. Paul Levinson, give us your Star Trek entry point, and then your opening salvo on your thoughts on Star Trek's Picard Season 3.
Well, first of all, unlike you children, I saw Star Trek, the original series, when it was first on, and I loved it, and I was a young adult. And as a matter of fact, my girlfriend back then, Tina, who is now still my wife, somehow she's put up with me all these years. I used to go over her house and we would watch Star Trek, and her parents had no idea what we were watching. I mean, they knew about science fiction, but they'd never seen anything like this on television. But I have to say, and I think I mentioned this last time, over the years, Next Generation has become my favorite Star Trek, even though I grew up watching the original series. A couple of quick points before I get into Star Trek per se. First of all, I agree completely about what Marybeth said about Terry. His work on 12 Monkeys was extraordinary, and that was not an easy thing to do. In my opinion, 12 Monkeys, the movie, is easily the best time travel movie ever made. I mean, better than Back to the Future, because it really did take those paradoxes very seriously. So, anyone who's able to do that, I'm not surprised that he did so well with Star Trek Picard. A couple of things about Star Trek Picard. First of all, just in a very general sense, I was pretty unhappy with it for the first 5 or 6 episodes, mainly because I've had enough of these like 2 separate, unconnected stories, and I know that sooner or later they're going to be tied together, but enough is enough already. And I was delighted to see Worf, and it was exciting, down on that planet, but they didn't make the connection. They didn't get together until, I don't know, the 6th or 7th episode. And that's when I think things finally did begin to come together, on this 3rd season. I agree with everything that's been said about Picard being good and even superb in parts. And listen, it's great when fans like us are serviced by these kinds of shows. It was wonderful to see everyone again. I do want to say, though, that Ed Spielers, if that's the way you pronounce his name, I think he's a superb actor. And it just so happened that I had seen the new season of You. That's YOU. It's actually a very good series. It's not a science fiction series. It's about a psychotic, brilliant guy who works in a bookstore, falls in love with women, winds up killing them. But Spielers was in this most recent season, and I'd seen him in 1 or 2 things before and was impressed, but I thought he was great in You, and in this completely different role, although maybe he's somewhat related here and there. I thought he was excellent in this 3rd season of Picard, and it's a hard thing to do when you have basically scene after scene with all of these icons that people have loved for 20, 30 years, however long. And then there's this new guy there. But he pulled it off well, I thought. So I give credit for that. I just have to say one thing, and again, this is a spoiler. Maybe I missed it. What happened to the Borg queen that we saw at the end of the second season? What? She just disappeared? Nobody even mentioned her. So I don't know what happened with that, and it bothered me.
That was the niggles.
I just want to know why everybody in the Star Trek universe doesn't live forever with the immortal triple blood that they showed in the
JJ Trek, yeah,
in the JJ movies.
That's different. That's a different, completely different.
Yeah, that's a great science fiction cliche because it's like, here's this thing that could get us out of the situation. And I almost thought, pardon the quote here, I almost thought they were going to go in that direction, Paul, and call her in because that would have been super easy, barely an inconvenience to bring her in.
Picard should have called her, yes.
I mean, she was his best friend in season 2, and they're just, what was she doing? That ship is just hanging out there. And I mean, there wasn't really a reason for that. But yeah, I agree. Are you done, Paul?
Yeah. I'm finished.
Yeah. I tell you, the great thing about Star Trek Picard for me, and the thing that I love about it is that it gives me a reason to have Paul Evanson and Michael Rizzo and Marybeth Ritkouski on my radio show to talk about it. I would live comment on Picard to Marybeth, who graciously would accept my messages and not say, "You're a creeper. Leave me alone, you freak."
Mostly I said, keep watching.
But it was,
because I was always like an episode or two ahead of you.
But it was always,
and
good.
I was like waiting for you to get to some relevant awesomeness, and you were always a step behind.
And I wanted to just stop and argue with you, and I think I was enjoying. But I enjoy that. I just wanted someone to bounce ridiculous things off of, and you are gracious enough that you don't tell me to go take a hike, so I appreciate that. Because what do they say on Mystery Science Theater 3000? I should it's just repeat yourself. It's just a show. I should really just relax, and you could have said that and it would have totally applied. I agree with Paul. There are a lot of things that happen in this show, and I say to myself, why is it this way? Why is it that way? But at the end of the day, the things I loved about this show wasn't the fact that, they tied up threads with the old Dominion War, or they tied up threads with the Borg threat, from the movie series. I didn't even like the Data story being wrapped up, and I wasn't happy with the Geordi plotline either, and I wasn't really happy with Dr. Crusher. That left the rest, and the rest, I could have just watched 10 episodes of Riker and Troy staring at each other and not talking. I could have, I don't know, maybe I think I must be getting soft, but the fact that, and I never really appreciated, Marina in the Next Generation series. I never really appreciated why she was there. I always thought she was just sex appeal. And it took a long time for me, it took until I was like a senior citizen for me to realize she's the most powerful person on that ship. She's sitting next to the captain. She can read the enemy's mind. That's why she's up there. And I feel like they never really truly did that. And in season 2, Picard shows up, or maybe it was season 1 or season 2, I forget. And she just looks at him in the eye, and she knows what's wrong. She knows he's sick. Whenever that episode was, and I thought that was perfect. And the same sort of thing is happening here, and I was waiting for her big reveal when she, did the therapy with Jack, and it was a very Stephen King moment. The red vines, you didn't really know, and I wasn't sure where it was going. I didn't know what was going on, and of course it turned out to be the Borg, which is, I guess, okay, which makes it make sense. But I just love the artistry the way that was revealed, the way that came across the TV, and once they pulled that rabbit out of a hat, it became less scary. It became, less good. But the build up to that, I really loved how he was. There's something wrong with this kid. There's something going on with him. And then I was saying to myself, did Crusher really sleep with Picard? Or was it, was it a changeling? That's what I really was thinking, and I kind of wish they had gone in that direction. Because in the 24th century, Paul and Marybeth and Michael, I can't believe a man can't control whether or not he's fertile or not. There had to be something where Picard can control his reproductive tendencies. There's got to be, the male pill had to be invented by then. And Picard can decide whether he wants to have a child or not. And it isn't just like, that the night of, he and Beverly, had that moment of passion and produced a child. It's like, not only should he have known better, everybody should have known better. It's like that should have been an option. And that I thought was a really big problem that they had to hang the show on. Here's an unknown child. It's the 24th century. Why didn't he have the ability to decide whether or not he wanted to make someone pregnant? So Rizzo, did you want to say something?
Well, I mean, we're talking about cliches and tropes. The surprise son, the surprise child, is kind of and what that was a grown moment for me. I know me and Marybeth had several conversations about it, hoping that Jack really wasn't his son, because it was so much. We were calling it. Carol Marcus and David Marcus 2.0. Here we go again, same thing. We, at least Kirk knew about his son and chose whatever not to be involved. But, it was kind of the thing that bothered me about that was that Beverly chose to keep it from him. I thought that was really, really not, why out of character. I didn't think, what I'm saying, for her to do that. And he was basically a kind of a criminal, he was, which
I mean, it was a doctor, but it was a Doctors Without Borders thing where they were operating outside. So it was like practicing medicine without a license, I guess, or something. There
was that. I don't know. It was but basically he was wanted, but I don't know if we want to go down the Niggle thing. There's a lot of stuff. The first few episodes kind of bugged me. One of the things that really bothered me right from the get-go was, Picard gets this message. He gets Riker involved. That's fine. They need to get to this random system that's just outside of Federation space. You're going to tell me that a guy who's a retired admiral and a captain doesn't have access to some kind of vessel of their own, that they needed to go and do this ridiculous fake inspection with the Titan to get it to go there, it just seems so contrived to me. I mean, it just even a civilian vessel, what I'm saying, they weren't going to a restricted area. It was just a random system outside of Federation space. So there's really no reason they couldn't even charter a ship to take them there, because they didn't realize that they were going to need a warship, which apparently the Titan wasn't. It was more of a science vessel. But then that whole mix of scenes where they're basically being treated again poorly, who are these guys that have saved the universe multiple times, and then once again they're kind of being crapped on by these people like Stashwick's character, who originally I did not like because of the way he treated Picard and Riker, but quickly I became to love him. Because of the way he was, and he had good reason. I love that whole Quint type from Jaws, that speech he has about Wolf 3519 and how he was there, and that was a great scene. So that's where it kind of, for me, I was kind of groaning, and I kind of said this online. I'm like, gee, I wish they hadn't done this, and I got slammed by people, going, this is, why are you, well, you just don't like anything. And, and I'm like, well, here's what I would have done. Okay. Tell me if you guys, instead of them doing this Titan thing, and I know that they needed to get the Titan out there ultimately later, but I would have loved to have seen something like Picard going, the Picard and Riker having this conversation about, we need to get to the XYZ system, whatever it was. And Picard goes, I have just the thing. They go out to his barn at the vineyard, and he pulls the tarp off an old DS9 runabout that he's been, you know, and that would have been a great connection. One of the old, and they take that out there, which is a fully warp capable ship that can go just about anywhere in the Federation. Of course, it wouldn't have brought in Seven of Nine and the Titan and all those Geordies, ultimately I realized then later what they were trying to do by pulling. I just thought that the way that those first few episodes played out was just, I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. It's Kurtzman's got his hands all over this again, and we're gonna crap on our favorite characters just like they did in the first two seasons of this show. So those are a couple. I got more.
Yeah, no.
Go
ahead, Paul.
A couple of things. One, in defense of Picard and Crusher having a child, unless there is, vasectomy, some kind of, physical operation, birth control throughout history, including now, has been notoriously unreliable. It works most of the time, but not all the time. And so I don't see any reason to think that's going to be any different 300 or 400 years from now, unless, again, they went for a physical operation. So that's one thing. As far as Picard and Patrick Stewart, who played him, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to say is really what was going on, but in the 3 series, I thought in many ways Patrick Stewart's performance, as much as I loved aspects of the 3rd season, was the least dynamic. In many scenes, he seemed like almost behind the 8 ball. He wasn't sure what to do. Now, maybe that's the way the script was written. Maybe that's the way he was directed. Maybe that's just the way Patrick Stewart is now. But I found that annoying at times, but then I was thinking if it was done deliberately, look, his character, Picard, has been through a hell of a lot. First of all, his biological being has been replaced. Who knows what kind of impact that would have on his intellect, on his decision-making capability. So I thought that that was, there were parts of it that worked very well, parts of it that didn't. As far as the Stashwick character, he also was one of my favorite characters. In fact, in many ways, my favorite character. But I thought that whether it was Terry Matalas, whoever made this decision, took an easy way out by killing him. In other words, he wouldn't dare. Who was he going to kill? He wasn't going to kill Riker or Troy. So you kill the character that's least loved, a pretty important character. They wouldn't even kill Geordi's daughter, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, that was an obvious point. On the one hand, they felt it's not realistic that these heroes can't all survive. But then it's a little bit of a cheap way out to kill the hero that is not one of the icons that we've loved for decades.
He was a red shirt.
Yeah. I mean, he was a lot of fun. He was pointing things out. He seemed to be like the voice. He seemed to be more in my head, like, oh, you're going to steal my ship. Oh, you were off on this other adventure. And, to go back to Picard again, Picard was Locutus. It's amazing after, of course, that episode happened in the middle of Star Trek The Next Generation. That had to continue. Star Trek had to continue. Patrick Stewart had to continue. He will always be the captain in Star Trek The Next Generation. But logically, if you have this, infection in you, where in one of the plot points of Picard is they exploited whatever was left in his system, and infected more people with it, he's dangerous. He should have been sterilized. He could have passed on his Borgification. And we're talking about the Borg here, boys and girls, not Victor Borga, the comedy pianist that Paul and I know about, but Marybeth and Michael don't. But
I know.
That to me right away is like his bodily fluids are dangerous. you know, and I mean, we've watched the Borg take over people by just, you know, touching them, and those two little tubes come over, and all of a sudden they're Borg zombies. So it seems to me it's not very smart of Starfleet to put him back in the center seat after the best of both worlds. And here again, too, you know, those things were exploited. It was one of the major plot point. I have to stop for a second and remind everybody that you are listening to WUSB Stony Brook, and we are live on the air on Friday Night Freeform, where we've, by order of Starfleet Command, taken over the music program and are discussing Season 3 of Star Trek Picard with Marybeth Ritkouski of the Star Trek Tours, Sci-Fi Distilled, Michael Rizzo of Sci-Fi Distilled and the Star Trek Tours, and Paul Levinson, award-winning science fiction author, Man About Town, and the next Anderson Cooper, here on WUSB Radio, who could have been on Anderson Cooper tonight and instead is here to talk about whether or not Picard should be allowed to have babies.
Much more important to know yours.
Exactly.
You know, Phil, they
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say they did multiple times say that he was cleared by Starfleet to resume his command and you know his commission.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, take that for what it is. It's that's how they course, because they had to. You're right, they had to put him back on, but you know, they at least kind of addressed it. That, you know, they gave him a full physical or whatever, but we saw even in First Contact that he still was struggling with a lot of what he went through during Best of Both Worlds. So, you know, I really was actually disappointed they brought the Borg in again. It's kind of like they've become like the Nazis of Star Trek. You know, when every time you need a bad guy, we just throw the Borg back in there. It just I was really actually happy when it was changelings. You know, oh, we're doing a Dominion War thing. Hey, this is new. You know, we haven't, you know, they haven't, but then back to the Borg again.
Plus the fact that Deep Space Nine seems to be, you know, the middle child, the forgotten middle child of the Star Trek franchise. So yeah, agreed with that. And that sort of enemy, you know, that can look like you, that can, you know, the ultimate spy, the ultimate, you know, you never see them coming sort of thing. So that is a special sort of thing there. And the effects they did with the changelings, I thought were quite good as well, especially with Vadic, with the way Vadic was doing things. Marybeth, we haven't heard from you in a while.
So if we're drilling down on good and bad plot points, interesting hanging plot point. What happened to Laris?
Yeah.
Like, did she just?
Yeah.
So does Picard get back with Beverly, or does he ever go back to like? How did that work? Good plot point. I actually thought the bit about the transporter and like infecting people using the transporter was genius.
Yeah.
Like I was impressed with that. I was like, okay, that's a nice bit of writing right there. Good job, guys. Bringing Brent back was quite good. I liked the way they did it. I had, I guess, erroneously been under the impression that Brent wanted out, which is why we killed Data off last season. And what did he just?
Dies every season.
He dies every season. Was he just like, oh, we're getting the band back together? Okay, I'm in again. I'm back in. Bring me back somehow. It's science fiction. No one's ever really dead. And what was the other really good plot point I was gonna? Oh, Raffi. They redeemed Raffi. I kind of didn't love Raffi. First two seasons was I was trying really hard, but she wasn't like. I don't know. I just wasn't glomming onto her, but I loved her this season. I loved her much better.
I think the actress who plays Raffi, whose name escapes me at this moment,
that's Michelle Hurd.
Michelle Hurd has tremendously great chemistry with Michael Dorn.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yes.
Yeah.
I loved her with Michael Dorn. I loved Michael Dorn. Like, I loved him. No, beheadings are on Wednesday, and then he's just sleeping in the chair on the bridge at the end.
This should have been Star Trek Worf. Honestly, you know, there could be a Star Trek Worf. You know, there's moments in Picard throughout all three seasons where you say to yourself, this would be a great series. The 7 of 9 we see in season 1, who is fighting to save, you know, the surviving unborgified Borg people. That's her thing. She's sort of like Laura Croft running around, you know, and I really like that 7 of 9. You know, the coming out in season 2 didn't really affect me one way or the other. I thought they were trying to be, salacious, or like, little, like, oh, look, here's two women kissing. It's like, no, I think we're all over that. That's 90s. That's so 90s. No one cares anymore. And it didn't really add or subtract anything for me. It was like, oh, okay, you two are whatever, fine. But that could have been something there. Worf really needs to be wharfing on his own. He needs to wharf out of here and have his own show. He is so good.
And they've since confirmed a Section 31 movie with Michelle Yeoh. But at the time when Picard was airing, I think Michelle had just won her Oscar for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And a lot of us were like, well, Michelle's out of reach now. We won't be able to get her back again. Well, why don't we send, Worf and Raffi off to do Section 31? Yeah. That seemed to make a lot of sense. With whoever else needed to go, But I guess we will be having Michelle back again. I think that's pretty interesting. But yeah, Worf was a lot of fantastic performances. Brent, as I said, they brought his character back, and his performance, he did the Gollum Smeagol thing, but he did it with 4 personalities, because he did Data and Lore, and then he also did one of the Soongs and B4.
B4, yeah.
He had 4 different personalities he needed to bring to life, one right after the other.
I think they brought each actor who did this show had to be given like a carrot on a stick. Like I think Crusher, Gates McFadden wanted to be more of an action hero, and they had to be brought in. She had to be brought in like she wanted to have that big action sequence. And I think with Data, Data wanted to have that opportunity to go in these 4 different directions, because they had to really entice these people in to do something like that. And I think that was that. I will say, and we'll get to this later too, but real quick, and I'll talk about this later, I find Data's overall story in all of Star Trek to be the weakest. I'm not a fan of the puppet, of Pinocchio, who wants to be a real boy, the robot who wants to be human. I've never liked that. Unless their last name is Calculator, Paul Levinson. I never really liked that. And I still had trouble with it, although I do enjoy the way it was resolved. It reminded me of Doom Patrol. Sections of the series Doom Patrol, the way he was talking to himself on that white background. I kind of like that, and he absorbed, his other selves. But I do have to say, and I read this online, so this isn't coming from me originally, the one person who had the drug problem was the person of color in the show. And I thought that was not a good thing. And they could have done...
That's a great observation.
But that's not mine. Yeah. It's Barney Danoki did that. But yeah.
That always was a problem. You talk about, bring that up. From season 1, I always question that in the 24th century, we're still having drug problems. I mean, you talk about birth control. We haven't licked addiction. In that I know that they've touched on it even in the original series a little bit, but it just seemed kind of, I can't believe that we're still having people going in rehab and for things that I guess it's not as utopian as, I don't know. I don't think Gene would have approved that character aspect. I just don't. It
gave the character some depth. And it gave, and attach it to our real world. At the same time, it brought a lot of baggage with it, and they could have gone in a different direction. Paul, did you have something to say on this?
Well, not about that. I'll have something to say about that maybe a little later, but I just wanted to point out about Worf. One of the problems with these kinds of revivals is all too often the plot goes for laughs by having the characters do ridiculous things. But I have to say I was very impressed with the scene in which Worf falls asleep on the bridge and is snoring. Because, again, he is much older, right?
I want to know. I want to know whose idea that was, Paul. Do you think that was Dorn's idea? Do you think? Could it have been, or was it the showrunner's idea? Whose idea was it? Where did that come from?
We'll ask Frakes when we see him at Trek Ticonderoga. He'll know.
Yeah. It was very realistic because he's old. He has been fighting like a demon. Unbelievable strength. They won, and now he's sitting and relaxing, and there's this boring conversation from his point of view as usual going on. So he takes a nap. I thought that was really
plus Paul, he's safe. He's with his friends, and he's home. He's in his safe place. He can let his guard down. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful moment.
Exactly.
And
I may
perfectly
start
played.
snoring
Perfectly.
now myself.
Yeah. Well, you're in your safe place here on Captain Phil's Planet, Friday Night Freeform, WUSB. Everybody's safe place.
Right.
You know, it was certainly a great scene, but the one thing I think they got away from a little bit was it's been established canon that Klingons live much longer than humans. Because we established that in DS9 when we had the original Klingons from TOS that were still alive in TNG years. So that's 100 years. So they got to be over in like almost into Vulcan age. So Worf shouldn't have been, to me, as old as they kind of portrayed him. Unless he just was, it's the mileage. It's not the years. It's the mileage. You know?
Yeah.
Well, he might have been old to begin with, though. How old was he in TN?
That's true.
Well, his parents were still alive, and he grew up as a child, so he
the Roshenkos are still alive. So
yeah.
I love
his human parents.
I love how
remember he was adopted.
What was that line, Marybeth or Michael? What was that line? I am Worf, son of. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, House of Slayer of Martok. Gowron?
No, Gowron. House of Martok.
House of Roshenko.
Yeah, it was like the whole everything.
The whole line, yeah. The line.
Would you like some chamomile tea?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
just,
you remember the joke in this original series was his favorite drink was prune juice,
which Dorn hated. Dorn hates that because when I've seen Dorn at conventions, and Dorn says, "No, every flippin' fan is going to give me prune juice every time I go to a convention." And then the story was, his fridge. He had come back from a convention. His fridge is filled with bottles of prune juice. His mom is visiting, and his mom says, "Michael, are you having trouble?" Heard Michael say that at a convention. It's just brilliant. So a lot of stuff to love, a lot of stuff to hate. To be a little bit. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, well, look, you and I talked a little bit about this, I guess, last week or 2 weeks ago when we did the show on the Robinson Calculator and Robust Through the Ages. And you said then that you were never happy with the Data character because to you, it was just another Pinocchio story. He wanted to be human. But I didn't have a problem with that. And in fact,
it's because I want to be a robot. I really want to be a robot.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, it might be not believable if he was just an android out there doing something, having nothing to do with humans. But the whole point of Data is he's an android who is working and thinking about and saving the lives of and carefully observing all these human beings around them. And furthermore, we know that even before the transformation that took place in this third season, even back in the original Next Generation, he did have some deep feelings. So you can believe that in his own way he had come to love the people around them. And when you love someone, you do in a way become or want to become more like them. So I mean, I don't really have a problem with that. I think it made him an interesting character. And the other thing about that whole trajectory is, and actually, Phil, you weren't saying it was otherwise, this has been the case almost from the very beginning with Data.
Yes.
So at least they've been consistent all along. He's an android who didn't want to really be an android. And when we know how he was made and we know about lore, et cetera, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Michael?
Yeah, well, let's the original series, Data's character he's the anti-Spock. Spock was basically a half human who fought his emotions, was trying to shed his emotions, become more robotic-like, pure logic. So Data was clearly written as the opposite. Here we have a completely logical being, very computer, but he wants those emotions. He doesn't have them, but he desires them. He wants to be more human. So he's trying to do the opposite direction. It was clearly done on purpose to be and he was also the same. He kind of had this Spock character. He had all the answers. He knew all the science. He was like a human computer. Basically, he was a computer. So, really that's where he was built to design. But the natural progression of his character, I think, was natural. I think they went through a lot of things with Data that worked, and I think they were able to kind of explore human emotion, the human condition through him, by even when they would explain certain things that we take for granted in our day-to-day lives that he just didn't understand. So I know what you're saying. It is a Pinocchio story, but I think it's probably done better than any Pinocchio story.
It just makes me crazy to watch him type on the keyboard on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise D when he can just plug himself in and interface with it instantly. My USB stick is faster than that. Why is he wants to be a human so bad he wants to type on a keyboard?
Nobody. The interface was designed for humans, Phil. The interface was designed for humans, not androids. Remember, he's the only one.
I'm not sure, though, what Phil thought Data was supposed to do. Just stick his finger into that computer and suddenly, okay, I'm going to order you around.
Well, they plugged him in. They plugged him into the Borg cube. He
needed like the R2D2 arm that came out and spun, and it went into the socket.
I couldn't help but
spun around and interface with the computers.
I couldn't help but think while we were talking, Paul and Michael, the way the robot is handled in the Orville, it seems much more reasonable, where she's teaching him and he's reacting robotically. Like his tendency is to be the robot, to be that, and she is bringing him along slowly, and he of course saves the day. I haven't finished watching the Orville yet. And he fell into the same thing that Picard did, where Picard became the object of the defeat of the Federation at Wolf 359, and here is, what's the robot's name in Orville?
Isaac.
Thank you.
Isaac.
I know, I'm getting old. If only I was an android, I could remember this stuff. But he has the same thing happen with Picard, where people resent Picard. Commander Sisko, the captain, in Picard, they resent him because of the people that Locutus, and the Borg killed. He committed mass murder on a gigantic scale. It's Pearl Harbor times 1,000, at Wolf 359. It's just terrible.
It was an inside job.
It was. It really was. And I just find that his, like when Isaac commits suicide, that's what a machine would do. He found the solution to the problem. The solution was he needed to remove himself, and he does without regret. And they bring him back because they love him.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Let me
Paul.
say, though, first of all, I think The Orville is a superb series. I love it. And I've said this before, and a lot of people think I'm out of my mind. I think it's right up there with the best, especially the third season of The Orville, the best of the Star Trek series. And Isaac is obviously a central character. But I do want to point something out about Data. It's a paradox, really, that I realized a long time ago. Let's face it, Brent Spiner is a human being.
Yes.
He's not an android. So, he, even when he didn't have emotions, you saw emotions, because as good an actor as he is, he's a human being. So it's easier for Isaac, because most of the time, Isaac is a machine.
Yeah.
It's because Mark Jackson's wearing a faceplate.
Yes.
You don't have to worry about what he looks like.
That's right.
The face is going to be impassive no matter what.
But
you see Brent's face.
He gives a great performance.
Human emotions betray you. Like your eyes will betray you every time. Mark doesn't have that problem when he's playing Isaac.
And he gives a great performance, like V for Vendetta.
All he has to do is hold his arm. Like all he ever does is everything's with the wrists. I don't know if you've noticed that, but Isaac is all hands and wrists.
With Brent, though, I think we could give him the pass that Dr. Soon gave him some human-like reactions to better interface with humans, so that maybe those were just part of his programming, but they weren't really emotions. But when somebody said something odd, he would have that kind of surprised look on his face. Yeah. So that's how you could kind of write it off.
Or he's programmed to have certain reactions.
He's programmed that way to react certain ways to certain stimuli. But it really wasn't the true emotion that he was reflecting. But you're right, you did see it. And of course, they really had struggling trying to get around the fact that he aged.
Yeah.
and he
Yeah,
shouldn't have,
they
you know,
they wrote themselves around that. Like
because
all three
season
seasons,
one,
they
the
were writing
makeup or whatever they did was terrible.
Yeah.
It just, you know, and I even then, I don't know why they couldn't have done a better CGI deepfake with that rather than try to just do him in
They
makeup.
can deepfake Luke Skywalker. They
I
can
know,
deepfake
and which,
a young
as we know, was epic.
friend.
You know, yeah.
Yeah, what was that movie that Martin Scorsese made in which he de-aged De Niro and Joe Pesci? I can't remember the name.
No,
It was
I don't know.
It was a good movie. It came out at the height of the pandemic.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it was the Irish mob.
That's right.
Oh, The Irishman?
Yeah. What
Yeah.
the heck was the name of that?
The
You're right.
Irishman?
Yes,
Maybe.
The Irishman.
Yeah, the Irishman.
And they did a great job of de-aging there because, I
Right.
mean, Pesci and De Niro, I mean, if you look really carefully, they didn't look exactly like they looked 30, 40, 50 years ago, but it was pretty close. So, you know, I think Scorsese had a bigger budget than the Palace did.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Well, you know, I felt I want to say the model work, but it's not model work. The CG, the spaceships, the space battles, you know, absolutely brilliant. One last thing I want to say about Data real quick is in Data's defense of me, to defend Data from Captain Phil, I find over the years a lot of my friends relate to him. The performance, the need to be human, the need to be accepted. And it's usually people, you know, who are the rejected, the people, you know, who could be transgender, the people, you know, who, you know, are gay and they don't know how will they be accepted and stuff like that. And Data has that role as the other, working to be worthy, you know, of other people. And I think a lot of people got that in Next Generation, even though Next Generation really seemed to avoid the same-sex marriage and whole thing issue. It seemed to, or like having a gay crew member, they kind of like skirted around that a little bit. But Discovery more than made up for that, you know.
Tenfold.
But I think it would have had better impact had it gone on in the 90s. I think that would have been good for people. But people, a lot of people, I think, really got that connection with Brent Spiner's performance in the original Next Generation series. So there's that. And that sort of thing served it well. Who wouldn't want to be a robot? That's my issue. You know, he could go out, he could walk on the hull of the Enterprise, you know, without a spacesuit on. That's awesome. You know, dude, just relax, enjoy it, be yourself. I guess, you know, that's my issue with him. Like, you're Superman. Why are you upset? You know? So
Well,
you know.
no, but he could still do that even though he has human emotions. So he's not giving that up, right? He can still walk on the
I
hull
know.
of the Enterprise.
I just
right?
feel it would have been enough. You know what I'm saying? You know, it would have been enough. And I don't know. I guess dealing with emotions all my life, there's just so much baggage.
Again, I think he was again, Phil. He was written for a purpose.
Yeah.
To fill that Spock role, and rather than just make it another Vulcan with the same kind of copy of Spock, they came up with this kind of anti-Spock. You know, it was he's smart, but yet had the opposite goal of becoming human. Whereas, you know, so I think for their purposes that it fit really well. Actually, I think it worked really well.
Well, I think it speaks to the you know, the old Star Trek the motion picture. The human venture is just beginning, and I think it was direct commentary on that. And of course, Data had to be based on what Star Trek Phase 2 Zahn, you know, because I know Troy and Riker, you know, came out of Star Trek Phase 2 as well. So I'm thinking that's where it was coming from. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a great tradition of robots in outer space and space movies in general. Forbidden Planet being a major example, but also even on television, Captain Video and his Video Rangers, which actually, at least for that, I was a kid. I was just maybe 6 years old, but it was on like in the early to mid 1950s. There was a character, Tobar the robot. Tobar was just robot spelled backwards. And a lot of what you see in the robots in Star Trek and Star Wars, et cetera, derive from that robot in Captain Video and his Video Rangers. So here's a shout out to whoever produced that. I have no idea.
Hey, before we hop back into Picard a little bit deeper, Paul, your calculators in your story. I can't tell whether or not they seem to have human emotions. I mean, she was married. So, so where? I mean, can you tell us anything? Can you give us a hint? You know.
Well, at this point, first of all, you've read the novelette. I'm now turning it into a novel, and so I'm about halfway through the second chapter. I haven't yet decided exactly how I'm going to, explain that. But at this point, the calculators were built by some kind of not biological process. And I'm not sure what that was. And this even happened in ancient history. And I do mention briefly in Robinson Calculator that even Heron of Alexandria had ideas about artificial beings and what we would today call robots. And we're talking about, 200-300 AD. No one knows actually exactly when he lived. It could have been a few hundred years earlier or even later. So at least in their current format, the whole point of the calculators is they're indistinguishable from human beings. They're androids. They look like human beings, but they're not human beings. They're something very different. And that's really all that I know about them at this point. So we'll just have to see where.
Well, it's ringing a very small bell in my head from years ago when I read, and this book wasn't really well received. Paul Anderson's The Boat of a Million Years. I don't know if you read that or not, where
I don't think so,
there was a bunch of immortals and what it was like to be immortal, and it follows them through the ages. And these calculators remind me of that, except I just remember that I enjoyed that book back when I read it. And then it was getting bad reviews, like they were calling it the Book of a Million Pages. So I that stuck with me, and I felt bad about that. But that's the vibe I'm getting in my head. Marybeth, bring us back on track.
Well,
wait, before you do, Marybeth, I need to remind everybody that you're listening to what station, Marybeth?
WUSB.
Stony Brook. It is 10:24. You are listening to Friday Night Freeform, the review of Star Trek Picard with Marybeth Ritkouski, Michael Rizzo, Paul Levinson, who is human, not a calculator, and Captain Phil, who wants to be a calculator, wants to be a robot. Go ahead, Marybeth.
Well, we have been drilling down into the details of the plot, and I'm sure Rizzo can pull up a few more examples for us. But I was thinking, let's take a look at some of the amazing performances and cameos and Easter eggs. That this thing was chock full of Easter eggs. And for cameos, I'm going to single out Daniel Davis, who I love and adore. If you've ever seen The Nanny, he played Niles, the butler on The Nanny, and he was hilarious. He plays Moriarty. We did get to see Michelle Forbes back again as Ro Laren, and that was amazing. So many people were
a redemption of the character.
Yes, a redemption arc. Calling out her scenes with Picard as being some of the that season's finest. And finally, we got to see Elizabeth Dennehy back again as, what's Shelby's first name? Elizabeth. I believe it's Elizabeth Shelby, right? Yeah. And
it was lieutenant, I think, at the time.
At the time, but now she's a admiral, commander. I'm not sure what she is now. But of all the people who should have been wary of the Borg, she might have gotten a little complacent there, but so amazing. So what else did you guys find for performances and Easter eggs and cameos?
Let me say, I thought Ro Laren was fabulous. She was great. So hats off to Michelle Forbes. I do want to say, though, a slight bit of criticism. They should have worked in at least one more time Guinan. Now, we did see her, obviously, in earlier seasons, and they put everyone and their grandmother in, and somehow Whoopi Goldberg wasn't available. So, that's a criticism. I missed that.
You know what? I remember Whoopi Goldberg being very, very cautious about COVID, though, and I believe they were still filming under COVID guidelines, because if you look at production pictures, there are a lot of people who are masked up. She may have just not wanted to be involved for that reason, because I found I was like watching her on The View one day, and she didn't even want to, this is back closer to the pandemic, didn't want to even come into the studio. She was afraid to come into the studio. Marybeth?
Yeah. That's exactly. I thought Patrick Stewart. I thought Patrick Stewart had been on The View and asked her, and I guess I wrongly thought she'd said yes. Maybe she was. Maybe she wasn't sure. Maybe it just was scheduling. You never know with these guys. They're so busy.
True. For me, Daniel was fantastic. I kind of, the way they previewed him, I thought he was going to take a bigger role in it. And I was sort of glad because I'm like, how are they going to work this in? He was, he walked off the holodeck and it was done. It was a piece of candy. Too many pieces, you'll get sick. Not enough. It was just enough.
But you did get, that scene did make you sick because that whole section at Daystrom Institute was Easter egg city.
Yeah.
If you were watching like what was going on in the background and some of the things on the screens in the background, it was loaded.
I will say the actress who played Shelby, in Best of Both Worlds and in Picard, and was a small role in Picard, when she did the Will Wheaton talk show and talked about how she was treated in the 90s at Star Trek conventions. Well, Shelby's sounds like witch, and now she's a strong person. That the visual, the way people perceive strong women changed from something derogatory, and she. It was a great moment. It was a great moment. She was there with Jonathan Frakes, I believe, and you could tell that she was really, really. She says, "I'm not a bitch." She was like, "This is not who I am," and you're calling me that because of what I did on the Best of Both Worlds. But that's something to be. She was ambitious. An ambitious woman, is the same as an ambitious man. And we don't, call ambitious men, that word. So yeah, I think that worked really well. If you haven't watched the Will Wheaton interview with her,
The Ready Room,
it's really worth watching because she was very emotional. You could see that, and I think you get a lot of extra stuff, extra feelings, and extra connections with this series by listening to these people. In the Ready Room with Will, and Will has a brilliant talent to bring out this stuff, just amazing stuff to talk about, and it's just astonishing. Especially the episode with Michael Dorn and the actress who played Michelle. Yeah, that was incredible, and
they clearly adore each other, Michael and Michelle. It was so obvious,
and just to see how Michael's issues, as the Star Trek character who's appeared in the most episodes, have just been like sidetracked year after year after year. And Michael's not getting any younger. Does the guy still fly jets? By the way, I remember when he was doing Icon in Stony Brook, he was flying fighter jets. But yeah. Anyway, I digress. Paul, your favorite?
Can I just
go ahead.
Okay. I just want to jump in here. I don't want to forget to say this. Clearly they left open the possibility of a spin-off series from Picard at the end, and I have no idea whether they're going to be doing that or not, but I would certainly hope that they would.
We don't know. I would love to see Michael back again. I think 7 of 9, I think Jerry Ryan has been perfectly set up. And both Terry Matalas and Todd Stashwick have openly admitted, at least on Twitter, they have tweeted that they have discussed how they would bring Captain Shaw back. Like, how would that happen? How would that work? They've discussed it. They've discussed it. So
good.
Yeah, we don't know that he's dead, do we?
We didn't. We left him there.
It's the old rule. If you don't see him die on screen.
Yeah.
Stuff happened before Picard. He has a history as the captain of the Titans, so they could just do a Captain Shaw show.
They could do,
There's plenty of strange new worlds for him to explore.
My rule is, unless you see the head blown to bits, the person could still be alive. And even then, I can't remember. There was a character in 24, Jack Bauer,
Oh my goodness!
who originally was working with whatever that central CIA like unit was, and then became a bad guy, and then was a good guy. And anyway, he was like outrightly killed, like shot like 20 times in the chest. I was saying,
And then the old bulletproof.
Well, no, it wasn't that. He was in the hospital and somehow he survived. 3 years later, the character came back. So
reminds me of the blonde girl in Heroes, right? I mean, she was quintuplets.
Right.
She was sextuplets. Yeah.
That's right. Oh, you talking about the Texas cheerleader in Heroes?
Yeah.
No, the other one.
Oh.
Not the cheerleader, but there was another blonde. And
the tall blonde from Hollywood.
Yeah,
she was great.
Yeah. Oh, what a!
They should have made a series just with her.
What a disappointment that show was, right? Oh my goodness! Like that.
Yeah.
What do we say to that? Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. It's just.
They tried.
That show lost me with save the cheerleader, save the world. Right there, I was like, nope, I'm done.
I'm out.
Yeah.
It had potential, but it just.
So I know it's crushing. It's really crushing. Worst. All right, let's. We're getting close to the end here. We have like less than an hour left. So I'm gonna do my worst moments of Star Trek Picard, and I have several. Like I've already said, I didn't like the Data storyline. I wasn't really fond of Geordi's storyline. I thought Geordi just happened to have a Galaxy-class starship in his back pocket, which was amazingly able to be run by 7 people, not the usual complement of 1,000 people, as we knew in Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah.
And it was able to fly inside a Borg cube, a la the Millennium Falcon in Return of the Jedi. So that was it's a lot of fun there. So I had issues with Geordi's whole storyline. But I mean, the big problem for me was that they're inside this nebula, which happens to be giving birth. And it's a strange space phenomenon. And okay, we've established that there are living beings in space from the original series when they had the space amoeba that loved to eat Vulcans. And then we had, of course, Encounter at Farpoint and things like that. Did they really know this thing was alive? I mean, did Vadic know this was the best nebula to hide in because it was alive? That's where, or this just happened to be a thing giving birth. And then does this gaseous space cloud, Paul, does the gaseous space cloud give birth like a mammal? Does it have contractions? So was it breathing properly? Was it pushing and breathing? I mean, it was just like making me nuts when they decided it was, when Beverly decided it was giving birth. I just thought this is ridiculous. I'll go to Paul and then we'll go around. Paul's in shock.
I'm just thinking. Look, I don't have anything close to that level of worst moments, but I mentioned already, most of them. But I'll sort of repeat them here in one place. I thought the two stories were too separated for the first 4 or 5 episodes, to the point where it almost seemed ridiculous. It just looked like 2 separate shows, albeit in the same universe. So that really bothered me.
Like Star Trek Generations. There was like 2 completely says like, oh, this great stuff is going. Troy's drunk down on Earth, and the Enterprise is being like taken over by the Borg, and Picard is getting his little spaceships knocked off. So,
that's right.
All this stuff is going on.
Although I thought Riker was in most...
Sorry, Star Trek First Contact. I got it wrong. Sorry.
Yeah. In most cases, Riker was fabulous. This really wasn't his fault. I thought that one of the worst parts for me of this 3rd season was the attempt to make him a sarcastic comedian. It was like a little too obvious already. A combination of his facial expressions, which again, I'm sure he was told to do, the lines that he said. I liked him best when he was fighting like hell in a couple of scenes. And as I'm not sure who said, I think, Phil, you said it, when he was with Troy, it was really pure magic. And I would have been more than happy with that. I don't know why they they put it on him to be like, the funny man in the story. It was not necessary. A little of that would have gone a longer way. I mean, it got to the point where in just about every scene in some of the episodes, there he was making the same sarcastic comments and expressions. So I thought that was a weak part of
I have to say,
the
though,
show.
when he reacted to Worf and Troy together because of their former relationship, I kind of loved that, every bit of it.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. Look, Troy, I thought was fabulous in every episode, and that was one of the high points of the show for me. She was thoughtful, she was intense, she was brilliant, she figured it out. I mean, she was the one. By the way, those red vines are something that was taken from the 12 Monkeys TV series. There were like red vines in that as well, and they were part of like the evil that was, infecting whatever was going on in that universe, in those worlds. But by and large, I mean, just to get back, I think that this third season was a great success, and it came at the right time after the first two seasons, which had a lot of good parts, but had, some serious problems. By and large, I thought this third season tied things together very well, and I think it's a pretty extraordinary accomplishment to be able to bring back all these people after all these years. And as we've said, not only from the Next Generation, but Deep Space Nine as well, and put it into a coherent, a 10-episode season.
Yeah.
And I thought that, that really worked well. It's a hard thing to do.
Michael, best worst.
Yeah, worst.
Or worst.
Well, there was a few. I do agree with what Paul said way earlier in the beginning with why whatever happened to Girardi Borg Queen. That she should have been around or intervened at a minimum. Anyway, but that aside, there was one scene with Jack Crusher. They throw him in the brig. This really bothered me. They throw him in the brig and he needs to break out, I guess, to continue the storyline. So they come up with this magical device that he just randomly has on him that will disable the force field. And the thing that bothered me is there was no establishment of that thing existing prior to that leads you to have it. And the other thing that bothered me is there's no scanner. Nobody patted him down. But like before they put him in this prison cell, this jail cell, something to have that he had this device on him that was quite made it easily for him to escape. So that to me was just really kind of, we just need so we need something to get him out. And it was just like, let's just have him have a random whatever. So that's
super
that
easy, barely
me.
an inconvenience to escape.
Barely an inconvenience.
Yeah, it was just barely an
Thing in my
inconvenience.
pocket.
So that kind of irritated me. The other thing that I found kind of irritating, I didn't like the fact that they renamed the Titan at the end. That really bothered me. As somebody who has a Marine background, being Coast Guard, it's bad luck to rename a ship. You never rename a ship. Bad luck. So you.
Ooh,
and there was no
maybe,
reason for it.
Maybe
I
that
didn't see a
could be
reason
part of
for
the
it.
new series. Maybe that'll be Star Trek Legacy. It was bad luck.
But
to
you
rename
could have
it.
left it as Titan. What was wrong with leaving it as Titan? I mean, just
it should have been the Titan.
It should have stayed Titan. So that kind of bothered me. I know everybody wanted another Enterprise. Like, they're going to be up to J, which Doug Drexler had designed. We saw that in Enterprise, which was the very futuristic J. They're going to be up to J before they get to that one. Because they seem to go through ships. The first ships lasted like 30 years, and now they get 5 years out of them. So they're like modern cars, they used to.
And we don't know what happened to B. That was one of the little.
We never. That was kind of a funny thing.
That was a funny one, yeah.
Something happened. Worf was
in charge.
I did like that they kind of left that like
and they all just looked at it.
Like he backed it into a something and wrecked it or something.
I just don't get comfortable with these new ships. Like, I'm comfortable with D. I'm comfortable with the original 1701 and the refit, especially the refit. Love the refit from the motion pictures. Hated that they blew it up in Star Trek 3, and I don't accept that the one they flying around in Star Trek 5 is a real Enterprise as well. It's a repaint job. But I would have liked to have spent a little time. Screen time with Enterprise E, and yeah, it's unfortunate. It really is. Before I go to Marybeth, I feel like the Titan design of the Titan is what is that car? That Buick, whatever it is, that looked like an old 1940s car. Was it a something cruiser, PC cruiser, whatever?
That was a Chrysler.
PT
Cruiser.
Barnum.
PT Cruiser.
PT Barnum and Bailey Cruiser.
It was a PT Cruiser. It was a Chrysler product.
So it looked like something out of the 1940s, and I'm looking at the design on the Titan, which looks like a ship from the Star Trek the Motion Picture era. You know, it would fit right in. You know, next to the Reliant and the Enterprise, and I'm like, so it's the PT Cruiser. Yeah, they're going backwards in design. I mean, I didn't get that.
They did that on purpose, Phil, because it was the reissued Constitution class. It was supposed to look like, it was purposely done to look like the original 1701.
But it's a spaceship. It's supposed to serve a function, and the function isn't, you know, it isn't a cruise ship. It's a spaceship. It's supposed to
Fan service, Phil. Fan service.
Yeah. So wait, so someone's going to build the Titanic, you know, because we want to be on a ship that looks like the Titanic, you know? I mean,
I bet they could and would and probably will.
QE2 kind of looks like the QE2 kind of looks like the Titanic.
Yeah.
It would be a great success. People would love to get on a
Probably
ship.
would.
like
People
that.
would go cruise on it. Yeah.
Like
Right.
vintage.
You put out an iceberg out there.
But no, they that was a purposely done. It was even called they had it like they had a name for it, but it was definitely Constitution class was in there. So there was no question.
It was a Neo Constitution, right?
Something like that. And it was no question that they were trying to model it off the original Enterprise.
I know there are Star Trek fans who spend their lives cataloging and arranging and designing and looking at all the different ships in the fleet, and I'm sure it like made them nuts. You know? So I'm not one of those guys. I just feel like it belonged in the 1980s movies. You know, that's how I felt. All right, I'm talking over.
You can argue this with Doug Drexler because I believe
will.
he had a lot to do with the
I totally
design.
will.
Yeah, you gotta talk to Doug about all of this. He's just so amazing, and with the detail.
Ships are his thing.
Ships are his thing.
He does
And
the
he'll
ships of the line calendar every year. He just does all the graphics.
And he'll explain things too. Like when JJ Trek, one of the JJ Treks came out, and in the movie they cut the ship's neck off. They cut it, and I remember, or they cut the nacelles, and then they cut its neck. I remember saying we were in the car with Doug. I don't know why it was me and you, Rizzo, and we were in the car with Doug, and I was like, that makes so much sense. How come they've never done? But wait a minute, why are we putting our engines out on two spindly little sticks? And then Doug was like, no, you don't understand. The warp bubble, like he had it all.
Yeah,
I mean, I got a
out.
20-minute lecture on why those ships are designed like that and what functions the design serves.
Well,
and it was all like legit. And one
of the reasons I love Enterprise is because Mike and Doug, when they designed NX-01, they were very specific to do things. Everything on that ship had a purpose. It wasn't just a blinking light. They could tell you what it was there for.
What it was there for.
And when they built the warp, the engineering section, remember it had that exposed warp core. Basically, it's horizontal in Next Generation. We see it vertical. We don't see it at all in the original series. And their theory is that it's under the floor. And they just, from NX-01 to 1701, they just lowered it so you didn't see it. So it was basically in the floor. And remember the forced perspective area where you saw the pipes? Mm-hmm. Those were plasma conduits going up to the nacelles.
Yes.
They had it all figured out.
Oh, yeah.
It's 10:45. You're listening to WUSB Stony Brook. Friday Night Freeform. Captain Phil in the center seat with a cast of thousands as we dissect the minutiae in Star Trek Picard. Marybeth.
Just to
best
follow
worst.
up
Best worst. Go ahead. You follow
best
up.
Worst. Follow up on Rizzo's. And Doug they were gonna slowly change that bridge on the Enterprise. They were gonna slowly change that bridge until it came to look.
They did. In fact, each season of Enterprise, if you notice, it slowly became
changes.
Closer and closer to
until
TOS.
You saw like the orange rail and all that.
Yep.
Yeah. Back to Picard, which is what we're really here to talk about tonight. It was super fun to see Aaron Stanford and Kirk Acevedo. They played those two, the Ferengi and that very interesting Vulcan, really interesting Vulcan character. Those are the two leads from the 12 Monkeys TV show. So it was just super fun to see them there. Phil, was it you? Were you complaining to me about?
Probably.
So there were some fantastic scenes in the on the holodeck, and the holodeck dressed as a bar, as I guess
Hated it.
10
hated
forward,
it.
I guess.
Hated
10
it.
forward San Francisco style.
Yeah, 10 forward San Francisco style. And there were some fantastic conversations in that bar. There was the one between Picard and the young students. Well, that was actually back on Earth, but between Picard and the young students, and that revealed a lot. There was the one between Picard and Ro happened in that bar. There were conversations between Picard and Jack that happened in that bar. But Phil, were you getting on me? Because the bar was a lifeboat.
Yeah,
And
it was
had
making
its own, or
it was
the
making me
holodeck
nuts.
was a lifeboat.
The whole
And
ship.
it was you,
Yeah.
Rizzo. It had its own power source, and you were like, no. But
Yeah.
that precedent had been set, I think, on Voyager.
I don't know.
I don't remember that on Voyager.
I know that precedent.
Not a Voyager.
Off
expert.
to the Google machine. Let me
But
look.
it did seem, yeah, the whole ship had no power, but they were running the holodeck to all hang out in the bar. And the excuse was that it had its own power supply and it was a comfort zone for the crew during stressful times. Which I was like, oh my God, that's so millennial Gen Z. You know, you got to have the comfort space because, you know, give everybody.
I know they wanted to have
stressful.
the
These
emotional
are highly
scene in
trained Starfleet officers.
there. Yeah.
Hang on, I'm looking.
I've seen
It was
crewmen
either
get sucked out
Voyager
of
or
the
Deep
main
Space Nine.
view screen into outer space when things, you know, like they attacked and they punched a hole in the bridge and the guys were sucked out into space. But no, we're going to go downstairs and be in the holodeck and right.
We gotta get a drink. We'll have a drink while we're
dying.
Yeah, that was I forgot about that until you mentioned it again. But that did bother me.
That's not boldly going. That's not. We're getting a little close to wrapping it up time, guys. So I'm gonna go around. The panel one last time and give us your final thoughts. And Marybeth, if you find the answer to this burning question about why do we have a powered holodeck suite when everything else is blowing up on the ship, let us know. No, she doesn't have it yet.
I am looking.
All right,
You guys go around. I'll
all
catch
right,
up.
we'll start with Paul. Paul, final thoughts on season 3 of Picard, the farewell, maybe, to Jean-Luc Picard. Will he never return after this?
Well, anything is possible. And I wish, Patrick Stewart a long, healthy life. And as long as he's with us and in fairly decent shape, he could show up again in a sequel to Picard. I do think that there may well be a sequel. I mean, they certainly, in that very last scene of the final episode, were hinting and pointing at a continuing story. And I hope that there is, because, and we talked about this last year, with the exception of Discovery, I've really been enjoying immensely all the new Star Trek series, and that includes Picard. And as I said earlier, of the 3 seasons, the 3rd season I think was by far the best. So I'm open, for a new season. And final thoughts, and I said this before, but it's worth repeating. It must be something that's not very easy to get that number of actors, and I'm using actors to include actors and actresses in our current parlance, all these years older and later, and to reprise their parts as well as they all did. And I think that I can't think of any other series which ever did anything even close to that. And, because the movies, although they were done later than the television series, were just really, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 years later. This is, 2022, 2023 when this season was made. And that's, pretty much, decades after we last saw these characters in a movie, and certainly the original television series. So I think that's a triumph, and I think it deserves a lot of credit for that. And as a fan, I was by and large very, satisfied. And I don't think there's any fiction that's ever been written and has appeared on pages of a book or on movie screens or computer screens or television screens that hasn't had some flaws. You just can't think about every single possible aspect of it that doesn't quite make sense, because usually you're too busy coming up with ways of dealing with the flaws and fires that you see burning in what you wrote. And I think by and large this season had really very few of them. And, the problems that we all had, actually, it strikes me, Phil, that your problem with Data is probably the single biggest problem that any of us have talked about. The rest of the problems that we've talked about have been like little minor points and discrepancies and missing characters. So again, I miss Guinan. Okay, so but that's not a major flaw in this. So I would give this, being a professor, I would give this third season an A-, pretty high up there. Not an A. It had its problems, but pretty close to that.
It is an amazing accomplishment, and it's also amazing. Everybody who worked on the show has a great love and respect, and especially you go to a convention where Marina Sirtis is. She always says it. She looks at the fans and she gets up and she says, "Thank you. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have the life that I have. Thank you so much." And I don't hear that all the time. And I know it was rougher on the original cast, coming from where they're coming, but these guys, they were treated well. Rizzo, final thoughts.
Well, certainly a vast improvement over the first two seasons. In fact, in my mind, there's only one season now of Picard, and that is 3. And as I said, it got better with each episode. I agree with Paul. It was great getting all these original cast back together. Getting the band back together, seeing them all on the D bridge again in their spots. Was just great to see. The overall story was okay. There were some niggles, but I think the improvements, I think Kurtzman, I think the feedback that CBS and Kurtzman got from season 1 and 2, at least I think they listened to the fans and they said, you got to fix this. And they brought in Terry, they brought back the Okudas, they brought back Doug Drexler, and they said, okay, we want to do this one for the fans. We want to make it, next generation. And like a lot of people saw, this was like another season of Next Gen. So it was, like you said, it wasn't perfect by any means, but it was a far big improvement over the other 2 seasons, and probably some of the best Star Trek that has come out, certainly out of all the new stuff. Whether we're going to see more, the fans pushed, we got Strange New Worlds because a lot of the fans says we want to see Pike, we want to see Enterprise again. I think you're going to see there's a lot of push for this Star Trek legacy. I think we're going to see the new Enterprise, the / Old Titan with 7 of 9 as captain, and probably Raffi and probably Worf. I think we're going to see it. When we see it, I don't know. What it'll actually be, who knows? But I have a feeling they'll do it because I think they're starting to listen to what the fans want.
Yeah, I think the MVP has to be Terry, and you listen to the interviews with him. He's a young kid. He looks like a young kid. I know he's not that young, but just so impressive. And so he knows the show. He knows it better than any of us.
It's important to note that Terry is a huge Star Trek fan.
Yeah,
the Okudas are huge Star Trek fans. Doug Drexler are a huge Star from the very beginning. Before they ever worked on the show, they were huge fans, and it shows.
Yeah,
the love comes through. And we see it.
I think he has the respect for the material that. Who directed Wrath of Khan again? Quick, tell me. Wrath of Khan. Who directed the Wrath of Khan? What was his name again?
Oh, Myers.
Nick Myers did great things with Wrath of Khan. Okay, but I don't think he respected Star Trek the way this Terry respects Star Trek. I want
to equate it to what Favreau and they did with Mandalorian. Huge Star Wars fans. They created it knowing what the Star Wars fans wanted, and it showed.
Yeah,
the love in that show, and the connections. It wasn't just we're gonna come up with a new and change everything. We're gonna give them what they want, and they did
because we're writing the checks.
Yeah,
we're writing the checks. Marybeth, Final thoughts. Season 3. Is this goodbye to Picard?
Never. Final thoughts, because I know you're all waiting with bated breath. Voyager, Season 3, Episode 12, Macrocosms. It was established that holodecks have their own power source. Why? Shelter in times of crisis or a lifeboat. Or if you're doing experiments like the ones that Geordi did with Leia Brahms, that are going to draw big power, don't be drawing it from the ship. Draw it from somewhere else.
I'm not buying the lifeboat thing. It sounds like such an ostrich. Okay, the whole ship blowing up. We're going to go on the holodeck and stick our head in the sand and go just...
I mean like jettison from the ship lifeboat type of, like a pod type of situation.
Why? All right, well, we can go down this road. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me, but okay.
Star Trek Picard, I think...
That's the way Geordi got to date Leah Brahms, you know? It's like he invented a girlfriend in that thing, you know?
That
when
whole
he
thing
meets
was
the
creepy.
real
When
one...
you look at it from this perspective, in our day and age, back to the 90s, and you look at that episode, it's creepy.
It really is.
And he doesn't get in trouble for it either. Well, he kind of does eventually, but guys, I think Star Trek Picard made television history. I cannot, with the few exceptions of pulling like say Tom Baker back for Doctor Who, I cannot think of another show. And if somebody can, let me know, because I'm drawing a blank. Another show where 30 years later they pulled in not just the whole cast, but drew from plot lines and storylines. This was a story that has been woven for 30 years across multiple shows in the franchise. It's just one great big giant story. Can you think of another? Don't say General Hospital. Maybe Doctor Who. Maybe
Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, Top Gun. But this is so many different shows. Top Gun Maverick's just two single points in time.
I'm just saying, but they pulled 30 years later. They pulled Tom back. He looked great, and
but the girl wasn't there. The girl wasn't there.
They didn't bring Meg back. They didn't bring Kelly McGillis back.
Goose was dead, so they couldn't bring him back.
Yeah. They didn't bring Michael. They didn't bring Michael Ironsides back. It's not the same. The entire cast plus the plot lines, plus plot lines from other stuff. This was television history, I'm telling you, and I want them to get that Emmy.
I agree with you completely. I think it definitely deserves an Emmy. By the way, I just want to say this is a long-standing problem with all of these award ceremonies. It was either 1964 or 1965 when Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Band won the Grammy for like Best Artist. And the Beatles, I think, weren't even nominated. So, they had already had I Want to Hold Your Hand. This happens over and over.
But was it for the Whipped Cream album, Paul? Because it has to be an exception for the Whipped Cream album. That is a great album. I mean, just the album cover. The album covers.
I have the original vinyl of that.
Yeah, everybody has that album.
I know, but it's no Meet the Beatles or Rub the Soul for sure.
Oh, I agree, but the Whipped Cream.
So, yeah, okay.
I agree.
You see this guy's in love with you.
Cool.
Great song. Yes, I'm in love.
Oh my God. You guys, it's 11 o'clock. You're listening to WUSB Stony Brook. Please go out and watch Star Trek Picard Season 3 right now and tell us where we're wrong, where we're right, if you enjoyed this. And no worries, we're going to music for the last 20 minutes of the show. And I believe Howard is on at 11:30 tonight with a live movie review. I think he's doing Into the Spider-Verse or the new Spider-Man movie tonight, I think. I should have read. I didn't have a chance. It's been a crazy week.
I might have it if you want it. Maybe, maybe not.
What, the Spider-Man movie?
Yeah, no, the Destiny's...
Oh, no, that was last week's. That was last week's when I canceled.
But it's the Spider-Verse. So he already did Spider-Verse last week.
But I think they're going to do a live review of it today. I think that's what it is. Oh, and Howard is contacting me right now, and he says...
I tell you it's not Spider-Verse.
He says, this guy's in love with you is not on the Whipped Cream album. So
no, it came, he's right. It came a little later. I couldn't think of it. That was not Herb Alpert's first hit. But so I actually asked her, the voice of destinies.
The voice of science fiction.
Ask the voice of science fiction what Herb Alpert's first big hit was. I forgot.
Yeah, A Taste of Honey? Was it A Taste of Honey?
Yeah,
okay.
Maybe. A Taste of Honey.
Or Rise or something.
Yeah. lifelong. Howard says he's a lifelong Herb Albert fan. Howard, if you're texting me, is it the live Spider-Man movie review tonight? Just text me back before I go off the air because I can get it right. Let's do our credits one last time. Paul Levinson, the Robinson calculator, and what else? He is doing the live review tonight. Yes, he is. Okay, so stay tuned for Destiny's The Voice of Science Fiction in 28 minutes as Howard discusses the Spider-Verse and we get away from the Star Trek universe. Will be your palate cleanser, your Spider-Man palate cleanser.
Let me just mention, you did say at the very beginning I should talk about its real life, and it wasn't that I was modest. I just forgot to mention it. So now I will. In addition to Robinson Calculator and Robots Through the Ages, there is my alternate history short story, It's Real Life, in which the late disc jockey Pete Fornatel, he was a disc jockey at WFUV FM radio.
It's a different station than WUSB, just so you know,
listeners.
Right,
but they're related, another university station, right? You're not listening to WFUV, this is WUSB. It goes downtown and goes into Grand Central Terminal and discovers that he's in 1996 in an alternate world in which John Lennon was never assassinated and the Beatles are still together. So this is a short story I wrote. It was made into a radio play. You can hear it all over the place. And in fact, Captain Phil was good enough to play it a while ago. And
I love it.
It's a place called kilowatt.co where you can listen to it anytime. And I actually expanded that into a short novel. And, with the writer's strike, I don't think anything is going to happen in terms of making that into a movie or a television series anytime too soon. But that's what I ultimately hope happens with It's Real Life. But you can get a preview of what that series would be if you listen to the radio play or read the story.
In a parallel universe where the Beatles beat Herb Albert for that Grammy, right, Paul?
That's right. Exactly. In that parallel universe, you see this guy. That was actually Herb Albert's first song.
Yes.
Howard is just in a different universe.
Yes, but you never mentioned. But you didn't know who Jeff Lynne was in that universe either. It was like, yes, that made me crazy.
It's really burned Phil. I know that.
Yeah, it made me nuts.
Universe, I mean, Jeff Lynne existed, but he hadn't yet made his mark. It was 1996. So.
Yeah, that. Oh, to the heart. Michael Rizzo, what is happening with Sci-Fi Distilled and Star Trek Ticonderoga?
Well, on this coming Wednesday on Sci-Fi Distilled, 7 p.m. Eastern on Facebook and YouTube, we are going to cover 1970s Saturday morning television. So everything from Land of the Lost to
Star Trek animated,
Justice League to Schoolhouse Rock, all those great things we remember when we were kids going down in our pajamas. I know, Paul, this wasn't you. And eating our cereal in front of the television, in front of our big Zenith console television, and watching these shows. And then they're having our mothers yell at us to get out and go outside because we're not going to spend all day in watching television. So we're going to cover that. Of course, what's happening in Thai, we got Shatner coming July 8th, I believe, 7th, 8th.
7, 8, 9, yep.
And then we've got Brent Spiner, we've got Jonathan Frakes, we've got, Spieler there. Help me out, Marybeth.
John Delancey.
And Don Delancey coming up in August, which is what's the dates for that?
18, 19, 20.
Yeah, so that's gonna be a really good Trek Ticonderoga. Lots of stuff to do. If you like Elvis, James is going to do his concert, I believe. So
I believe so. Yes,
it's always a good show. So lots to do. So get your tickets; they're on sale now for both of those events. StarTrekTour.com.
Marybeth, did Michael cover everything? Anything with you?
I think he did. Yeah, guys, go to StarTrekTour.com. Get your tickets for either Shatner or Ticonderoga, or hopefully both. And watch Sci-Fi Distilled live Wednesday nights at 7 on Facebook and YouTube.
And
or catch us as a podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts.
I got to catch up on the podcast.
He's got to catch up on the podcast. And please remember Nerd Alert News. Colleen Bennett, our friend in Denver, who couldn't be here tonight because we had to reschedule from last week when I was driving all over Albany in the middle of the night. listening to a rerun of Friday Night Freeform with Marybeth and Michael and Paul when we were doing season 2 of Picard. Ran that old show, and Roy Belquist with Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner, which is on every other day on the Facebook machine, and you can Google that and find that out. And Roy's actually at Wonderfest tonight, looking at models of Space 99 Eagles. So there you go, and stay tuned for our good friend Dr. Howard Margolin, who's going to be live in studio with a review of Spider-Man, whatever the Spider-Verse.
Across the Spider-Verse, which I've seen the previews and the trailers for it. It looks fantastic, absolutely amazingly animated, astonishingly great film, guys. I know it's past your bedtime, Rizzo. Paul's on vacation, so that's okay. And Marybeth does whatever I ask her to, so she never complains. She's just so nice, easy to get along with.
Crazy.
So I know, but I appreciate
I'm
this.
always on vacation.
But it's absolute pleasure to have this discussion with you. I enjoyed it. It was nice to kick back and discuss this for 2 solid hours. Much to my enjoyment, hopefully not to most of the listeners' dismay. We had a good time with this, and check it out. And if you want to debate any of us, Paul will probably be putting up a copy of this on his blog and on Facebook. And Paul answers his email.
Believe it or not.
And so do I. You can find all of us on Facebook. Yeah. All right, my friends. It is time to say good night, and I will see you all at the end of Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Yes, season 2, June 15th, Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
And I hope you enjoyed that discussion of Star Trek Picard, the final season. I'll be back here soon with another episode of Light On, Light Through. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sound, and keep doing whatever you can to help those brave people of Ukraine get the Russian invaders out of their country once and for all.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
Athens, 2042 AD. She ripped the paper in half, then ripped the halves, then ripped what was left again into bits and pieces of history that could have been. Sierra Waters had read once that, years ago, it was thought that men made love for the thrill, while women made love for the sense of connection it gave them.
Curled Up with a Good Book says, Sierra Waters is sexy as hell. You can find out more about The Plot to Save Socrates by Paul Levinson at theplottoSaveSocrates.com.
Paul Levinson's Silk Code, about an ancient biotech war raging on in secret for centuries.